Charlie Cypher, the dean of the Pamplin business. I'm going to turn it over to both of you and sort of take us through a little bit of your professional journey and what got you to VentureBeat's mission as a philosophy as well as a book. So I'll start with you, Arun, and then I'll come to you.
Sure. Thank you, Dean Sarkar, for having me here, and thank you all for taking time to join us. So look, my background is I grew up in the D.C. area. My father's in public services, Naval Sea System Command for 45 years, is still working there today. So public service has been in our family. My professional career was at the venture capitalist. I worked with entrepreneurs. The first half of that was really in investing in your typical startup, Valley-like investment. But the second half of that time was really investing around things around mission, tech, and entrepreneurship, looking at emerging technologies in 08, 09 that really were around national security and government and societal benefit. And then I started thinking about what's next after having a 20-year career in venture and my next chapter. And I started teaching. I started teaching at Georgetown, and I was teaching at Stanford. And the class I was teaching at Stanford was taking a little bit of what I'd seen as a VC investing at this intersection, and it was called Valley Meets Mission. So it's a predecessor to the book. And the real notion there was really talking about to these students about like not wasting their talents and their platform, and I say this to all of you as well, on the next Candy Crush 3.0, right? Like there's bigger problems to go solve, and you can do those in a for-profit way, and we need this generation inspired to go do that. In addition, those largest of problems, climate, national security, cybersecurity, food, healthcare, it's going to require some level of collaboration with government. So how do we take the entrepreneurial velocity of innovation that we have in the entrepreneurial ecosystem and match that to the scale and reach of government to solve these problems? And so in teaching that class, I started to see students, realize that many of these students are siloed, right? Many of you that are in the engineering department don't think about government, public service, and those of you that are doing more public service-oriented things don't think about doing something entrepreneurial. And, how do we expose this? And that was really what led to the book. What I will say is the through line between teaching and entrepreneurship I found was optimism, right? Like you're not an entrepreneur unless you're optimistic, because you don't get out of bed. Someone will tell you that, if you're not optimistic about what you can do as an entrepreneur, you shouldn't be an entrepreneur, right? And so I loved being in the entrepreneurial community because you're around optimists by nature, sometimes delusional, but optimistic. Likewise, I think this is why many of us also want to be around students like you. It's like you're in the academic environment because you're around optimists, which are, all of you that are at school today. And if you're not optimistic now, it doesn't get better. So please be optimistic. But this is why, I felt like there was an opportunity right now in what we were doing and seeing to kind of bring that optimism both from the academic side and the talent that you all present, but also the innovation from the entrepreneurial community to go solve big problems. And we can talk more about that. So with that.
So Arun just mentioned not getting out of bed in the morning. That was my college career here at Virginia Tech. So, look, I grew up in Blacksburg and went to Blacksburg High School and went to Virginia Tech and never thought I'd be an entrepreneur because, quite frankly, I didn't think I was smart enough. There's probably some truth to that to this day. So after school, I went to work for Ernst & Young and then Oracle Corporation, big software company. And I was like, I think I remember I was at a place in Hutchinson, Kansas, when I was working at a manufacturing plant. And it was like 6 degrees out. And I was in one of those hotels where when you step out of your room, you're outside. And so it was not a Four Seasons for those of you guys who stayed at a Four Seasons. And I was like, why the hell am I doing this? I bill at like $365 an hour. I get paid like $50,000 a year. Some guy's getting rich. His name's Larry Ellison, 5th richest man in the world right now. So Larry got rich. And from that point on, I was like, I'm going to go do my own thing. So I've had 3 businesses, the last of which was based here in Blacksburg, called 1901 Group. And I think we sold it 3 years ago. But that was kind of, for me, the I wouldn't say the pinnacle of my career because it's gone downhill since then. So maybe it has been the pinnacle of my career. But that to me was the bringing together three things. One is doing right by people in a geography. The North Star of that business was to take underserved areas for technology, because technology had traditionally been on the coasts like New York, Silicon Valley, maybe even Austin, Texas. And I always believed in this area because I grew up here, and I figured out that like 97% of the population was smarter than me, but I was in tech. So, I figured that there's plenty of smart people down here. Why don't we set up an operations center down here and take advantage of the population down here to build a business? And it took 10 years and a lot of work, but we ended up building a business and employing, I think, 300 people in this area between here and Abington. And one of the things about what we did is we didn't really care where you came from or what your background was. What we cared about was that you had a good attitude and an aptitude. So we developed a workforce development program, which we had guys that were welders. One guy was paving street. One guy worked at a warehouse. Then we trained them. We got them into IT, and we helped them build a career. The business now is within Leidos, which is a Fortune 100 government services company, government integrator. And it's much bigger business right now, probably because I'm not there, and it's grown and done much better without me. But so that was, to me, kind of bringing together three elements. One was providing service for the government and trying to make society better, helping society through providing jobs down here, and doing it in a way where you can make a profit. And we kind of brought those three things together in the Venn diagram, and it ended up working out. So I've known Arun for 20 years. What he didn't tell you is that he went to Stanford and Harvard, and he got a free ride to Virginia Tech. And at the same time he got a free ride to Virginia Tech, I got kicked out of Virginia Tech before I even attended a class, because I failed a class my senior year in high school. So apparently he took my spot, but when he decided to go to Stanford, they let me back in. So here I am today. So it's all come full circle. So thank you for going to Stanford. We'll go with it.
I think one keyword, taking away that coming back full circle, I think in a way, the things that you just are talking about, especially in the book or through your own experiences, is sort of a full circle, right? Doing that impact and the mission at the core of it, underlying it, and sort of looking at a venture from a perspective of coming that full circle of impact and sort of making a difference. But in that whole story, when we talk about entrepreneurship, and I think our students would agree with it, we don't always think of government in that central position, right? We think venture capital, we think, the idea, the entrepreneurs, maybe even private, but we do not ever think government. But you kind of bring the two together in your book, and Sonu, you kind of lived that through your own experiences. Talk a little bit about the role of the government and why that makes a difference, why we need to join forces with government, especially to realize entrepreneurial dreams.
Yeah, so look, do you need government to be an entrepreneur? No. But can you solve big problems with government, bigger problems with government? Yes, is how I would say it, right? And so, when I think about the superpowers of this country, right, they fall in two ecosystems. It's the higher ed ecosystem, our ability to create talent, evidenced by all of you that are here. And I think it's our ability to innovate in our entrepreneurial ecosystem. And those are deeply, deeply difficult to replicate for anywhere else in the world, and we're orders of magnitude ahead of anywhere else in the world. And the evidence of that is that everyone from anywhere else in the world, they can pick anywhere to go to. They come here. They come here for school, and they come here to innovate, right? What we haven't over decades done is, modernize the infrastructure to connect those two ecosystems around larger government ambitions, right? And what do I mean by that? As we're now heading into climate, we're not solving climate without government. But the talent and the innovation is not inside of government anymore, right? That's what's changed. When we had the space, when Kennedy says we're going to put someone in the moon, the best talent and the best capital and the best tech was already in government. Today, that's dispersed, right? So we have to build the infrastructure to connect those around those same kinds of aspirational ambitions. That's the opportunity we have. And you're seeing that now with climate tech. You're seeing that now with national security and what's happening in defense tech. You're seeing it in space. You're seeing it in health. You're seeing it in food. And so a large part of what we're trying to do is say, how do we align what I would consider our real secret weapon, right, which is the talent we have in this country, but also the entrepreneurs that we have. And the reason now versus before is in a world that's changing as rapidly as it is, right, where we have technological change, we have geopolitical change, we have environmental change. The people best equipped to solve those problems are people with an entrepreneurial mindset, because they're the ones that know how to build the plane while you're flying it. Like guys like Sonu are what you need, people thinking that way, because we're not in a world where we can have 5 or 10-year plans anymore, right? Anyone that had a 5-year plan 3 years ago did not have ChatGPT in their plan, right? And if they did, if they tell you they did, they're lying, right? And then now those that are going to be able to pivot with an entrepreneurial mindset will succeed, and then others will bury their head in the sand and they'll fade away. And so I think from a national competitive standpoint, it's become imperative that we bring these two together, and that was a little bit of what we were writing about in the book.
So, and great for giving us that context. So when we think of entrepreneurs, we think of speed, risk takers, agile.
Yeah.
When we think of government, we think sluggish, slow, process. How do you get these two very, very, two entities that appear to be at odds from the way I see it? How do you get them to partner together? And so that's a question to you, Arun. And then Sonu, I would like you to maybe share, how did you get over the hurdle of a successful partnership through that? So.
Yeah. So look, I think you bring up an important question here, right? Which is we try to hit on in chapter 2 of the book up front, before you can get into coming up with solutions and things of that sort, you have to address biases that exist. And so we have a whole chapter around, humanizing government and personalizing entrepreneurship. So what do I mean by humanizing government? It's easy to say, get government out of my life. We don't left government, this, that, the other. And it says in a political statement of more or less, but there is a role for government. We have to acknowledge that, right? And what is government? Government's an organization, and at its molecular level, it's just groups of people and made up of individuals. They're trying, have positive intent. They're going to work each day trying to do their best. We could agree, could it be better or worse? But that could be true with any organization, right? And I think part of this is humanizing it to the level where it's easy when you're not part of government or part of any organization, right? We're seeing this right now in the polarized world that we're in. If you're not part of that group, it's easy to say that group, is bad. But when you know people in that group and you've interacted with people in that group, it's a lot more difficult, right? And so there's this humanization part of government. Likewise, on the entrepreneurial side, the reason we say personalized entrepreneurship is that it's easy for another group to say like, oh, entrepreneurs are just, money grubbing, socially extracting capitalists, which is not fair, because many times people are conflating that with the billionaire class, right? Most entrepreneurs are out there trying to do their best. It's a mindset. They're gritty, they're resilient, they're risk takers, right? And what we need to be able to separate out is the importance of having that entrepreneurial mindset as a country. At the core, it's really what makes America great, right? The American spirit of entrepreneurship is nowhere else in the world. It just isn't. The idea that you could start a company, it may not work. You could start another one, it may not work. And then you can still get funding to go do a third one. That's a deeply American concept. Our allies don't even have that. Because if it was easy to replicate, it would have been replicated by now. But also the idea about entrepreneurship is that you don't have to start a company to be an entrepreneur. It is a mindset of how you live your life, right? It is about do I want to keep testing and learning? That's a key part of entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship isn't about knowing the answer. It's about knowing how to ask the right question, right? So with that, in personalizing it, for those in the audience, most of you aren't here yet, but you will be one day. Having a family is an entrepreneurial endeavor, right? You have a co-founder, you may have products down the road that you have product market fit for about 18 years, and then you launch them. And you hope they don't come back, but some may. But the point being that, like, we're all entrepreneurs, actually, right? And to say, like, they're bad. And so the idea with humanizing government and personalizing entrepreneurship is to bring it down to a more human level, right? And then to your point on collaboration, I think you have to recognize, these are different cultures. And, anytime you have different cultures, what you need are dual citizens, right? I was on a panel with this gentleman, Nan Mulchandani, CTO at the CIA, Indian-American guy, but had started 4 companies in the Valley, and then is now, again, at the CIA, but prior to that was at the DOD. And he says, hey, I'm a dual citizen. And the crowd thinks, oh, he's from India and he's an American, so he's Indian American. And he said, no, I'm from the Valley, but I also have my family here in DC. And I think the reason I say it that way is that when you're a dual citizen, you have mutual respect, and you have identity in both camps. And so, what can you do when you're a dual citizen? He's able to say to his team, rather than going to his team in the CIA and saying, like, you guys aren't innovating fast enough, you don't know what happens in the Valley, he's able to say, let me take you to see my family in the Valley. You take these engineers and you spend 3 or 4 days with cutting edge engineers. And what you're really, and they're getting to see a local view, not a curated tourist view, not an expat view, but a local view of what innovation looks like. Way more powerful. And then they come back. And implicitly what he's doing is leveraging as a dual citizen trust. Because that's what's broken down right now. Like, we don't have trust in the system. And so the more dual citizens we have, I think the more trust we have. And so when we talk about how do we get these two things to collaborate, it's also recognized, one final piece is the risk reward system that each operates in. We were chatting about this earlier, Dean. Government gets measured by its worst deal, and private sector gets measured by its best. So as a VC, I joke around that if I was measured like government, I'd never raise another fund. What does that mean? As a venture capitalist, I can make 10 bets. 7 of them could go nowhere. 3 of them are wildly successful. I'm oversubscribed in my next fund. Everyone thinks I'm a hero. On government, I make 10 bets. 9 of them can be okay. 1 of them's called Cylindra. You're carrying that around for 10 years. Right? So we need to understand that the systems and the measurements that we apply on both these ecosystems are very different. And they're going to have then implications on culture. If I'm measured by my worst deal, what do I do? For anyone that plays sports, if you're measured, if you know your coach is going to pull you out when you make a mistake, you don't shoot. You don't want to miss, right? You play tight. And if you know you've got the green light to go win, you shoot. You play more aggressively. And so we just need to understand those dynamics. One of the things we say in the quote in the book is a friend of ours, Dan Tangerlini, had a idea of, like, each agency has what they call an inspector general. And an inspector general's job is to make sure you stick to the playbook, right? And if you deviate, like, you get in front of a congressional hearing. So what does that do if you're in the agency? Like, you're never going to innovate. Because think about what entrepreneurship is about. There is no playbook. Like, Sonu had a playbook, but he's going to adopt it based on what he hears from the feedback. If you don't have that latitude, you can't adapt. So his answer to that was, like, every agency should have 2 IGs. And you're like, why? How is 2 more helpful than 1? And he's like, the second one should be called an innovation general. And the innovation general's job is, if you're not innovating fast enough, you could also get pulled in front of a congressional hearing. It'll never happen, but it's an interesting thought exercise that you need to have that tension in any organization that says, I need to be measuring both innovation and risk, right? If I'm only measuring risk, then I'm only going to mitigate that, right? And so I think the way you have this partnership then, to answer your, Dean, your question, is that you have to recognize the culture that government has, But then how do we create a renewed partnership with entrepreneurs to let them take the risk? An example would be deep research that's 10, 15 years out. Everything in your iPhone that all of you have, all of that is government research, right? The GPS, the internet, the screens, the batteries, all that's government research, right? But pulling that out then into the private sector, let them innovate on it, right? Let them commercialize it, pull it out there, and we can dual purpose that back in. That's the renewed partnership we need. Now, as we try to say in the book, we do this as a country. We have the capacity to do this. We just don't make it normal. Like we do it when our backs are up against the wall, when we're falling behind in an industry like space, or when there's a COVID crisis like with Moderna. But, the question we're trying to pose is, why isn't this the norm? And how do we make it the norm?
I think that's one of the lovely things about the book is that, it's all about balancing odds, right? So I wanted to move on to another odds, and that is the odds of doing good but making money. Often we see that dialectically opposite. You can't do one. You have to do one or the other.
Right.
But you talked about the Venn diagram,
Yep.
where you basically bring commonality. So Sonu, what's the secret sauce for getting that Venn diagram, the intersection of that small little part of that Venn diagram successful and basically meeting of the odds?
That's a tough question. I'd have failed that in college. I think the reality is it goes a little back to what Arun said about just, and I know this is very trite, but it's really respect. When we started the company, we had a tremendous amount of respect. And I had been around the government before. I had a commercial company first, and then I had another government company. But we had a tremendous amount of respect for public servants because they do things, they don't make a ton of money, but they do things, everything from, and I know you guys have seen all this stuff before, but the guys on the front lines in wars to people really doing stuff that is meaningful without getting the commensurate financial reward. That some of the best people I've ever met were public servants. And they did things in a way that I was just like, I'd be like, oh, let's go out and have a conversation and have lunch. And the lunch would be $25 and they would slide over $15. I'm like, no, I got it. They're like, no, so we have incredibly honest public servants. So one was respect there and respecting what they do and the mission they do. The other was, there's tremendous amount of talent around this country that's untapped. And we've created this weird hierarchy. I mean, you guys are the elite because obviously you go to the best university in the country. But we've created this hierarchy of if you're a college grad from a great school with a great degree, you're in one group. And then if you're someone that may not have had the same opportunity and you're either in a community college or you're somewhere else, you're in a different group. And it didn't used to be that way. It used to be that high school grads and college grads, their income was roughly similar for many years. And it's really taken a different direction. So we also wanted to have respect for the people in a region that we thought were talented that might not have the same opportunities. And so for me, it was always about like, if we can maximize the talent in the region and we respect our client and we put those two things together, then I have people that, one, nobody believed that, and it's not an insane story, but nobody believed that we could start a federally focused business in Blacksburg. Zero. Everybody's like, that's the dumbest idea. You're a moron. I go, tell me something I don't know, blah, 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 right? But we did it. And part of the way we did it is I said, hey guys, nobody thinks we can do this. You guys are a bunch of hillbillies from Southwest Virginia. Nobody thinks you guys can do this. There's a little implicit chip here. We had tremendous respect for our client, but once you kind of get that together, then you can kind of reach where, the third part of the equation is how do you make money? And, if you can figure out a good value proposition, which we had a great value proposition here, the cost of living is less. We trained all our own people. I didn't have to go pay $120,000 for you guys. And so we built a workforce down here, and then we built a value delivery system that serviced the government at a much better price and quality point than the typical labor-based model. The way the government works is they want you to manage their data center. They hire 37 people. The way we did it was different. You manage a data center? Tell us what's in the data center. How many servers, routers, switches, databases, and we'll price based on that because that's what drives the actual work. So we had a better delivery system. We had a great workforce. We had less than 7% turnover because we built careers, and then we had respect for our client. And you kind of put all that together, I think you can make a tremendous impact, and you can make a little bit of money along the way. So what Arun said is right. Being an entrepreneur is not just about like going and starting next Candy Crush. It's about an entrepreneurial mindset. And if you can bring that Venn diagram together, I mean, I'll tell you, my biggest happiness wasn't, making a little bit of money. It was seeing when we sold the company, $50 million of the piece went back to people in the company. And a lot of them were here in Blacksburg. And it was great to see people that started, out of community college that are senior people in our company right now. So that to me was like the real icing on the cake. The money is great, but I can tell you, being an entrepreneur, if you say, I want to be an entrepreneur because I want to make a shit ton of money, that's just a tough way, because the minute things get hard, you're like, you know what, I can go get a job at McKinsey and make more money, or I can get a job at ExxonMobil and make more money. So you can't start a business by saying, I just want to go make a ton of money. That's a byproduct of like your belief system.
Just to add to what Sonu's saying, I mean, in being intimately, I was privileged to be on the board and seeing what he built. At the core, right? When people say like, can you do good, or how do you choose between the two? It's like you don't have to, right? If you build it into your business model, right? The way it should work. This isn't like, oh, I'm going to go do X and then on the weekend we'll do Habitat for Humanity to feel good. This is like my business model is the more good I do, the more profit I make, right? So align your mission, right? This is why we talk about, like, I feel like in today's age, you guys have the ability, more so than we even did coming out of school, to align people, purpose, and profit in a way, and mobilize capital around that in a way that didn't exist, right? This ecosystem didn't exist before. And so, thinking about what that purpose is, and, to the other point that he was making, like, it's a hollow career journey if you don't have purpose. I'm just telling you. It just is. You'll feel like you're doing whatever you're supposed to do. It's a hollow career journey, and it'll catch up with you, right? And look, we were all in your shoes, and we know how this works, right? Like, everyone's telling you to go do this job or that job, be a banker, be a consultant, be whatever. And, the best jobs don't come to campus, right? You got to go find them. The easy button is just, we refer to it in the book as the river of conformity. That's just like, all right, let me just go get the free meal, then I'll do the free interview, and then I got an offer, so let me just go do this thing. But, like, it'll catch up to you. I've had my 25th business school reunion, and I'll tell you, like, the people that are the most interesting, the most happy are the ones that were able to embrace, like, what they wanted to do and embrace, like, a non-linear career. Like, your career doesn't have to be a very linear process. If you listen to Sonu's career, it's like, yeah, I'll go do this, I'll try this company, I'll build that out, I'll try the next one.
It was mostly a disaster, Clayton.
But look, one of my CEOs that we talk about, has this quote, and it's a paraphrase of a Steve Jobs quote, but like, my career never made sense looking forward. It only makes sense looking backwards. Right? And I think for a lot of folks that are at the other side, or, closer to our end of the career, there's a lot of truth to that. Like, we were making decisions that we didn't know where it was going. But I think a lot of folks today feel like they need to know where they're going. It's okay not to know, because that's why you went and got this great degree. Because you should feel the agency to go do, you'll be able to do what you want. If it doesn't work, that's the entrepreneurial mindset. It won't work. Everything's not going to work.
And if it doesn't work, you got a great degree.
Yeah.
Always going to have a job.
You'll always have a job, and you've got a great community, right? That will help you in a great network that none of us had coming out of school. So again, it's about how you use, what you have in front of you today. And I would just, challenge you to think about using it to free you to explore what you want to do, and not handcuff you to feel like you're having to do what people expect you to do.
This is a fascinating take, and I've got a lot of excitement about some of the things you talked about. So purpose and mission, right? And you talked about the non-linearness in your career. So I want to get us to think a little bit more narrow into entrepreneurial venture and the whole idea of the book, the mission of the venture meets mission. My question is linearity in that mission. Is the mission, is that very linear? So do you have a mission? Then you follow that and you sort of get into your entrepreneurial venture, or does the mission itself evolve or change? Is it the service or the product that drives the start and the mission evolves? Or is it the mission that starts the journey and the product service sort of evolve?
Probably one or two things that are your North Star that you really care about, where you feel like that will help you feel like you're making a difference. It could be food insecurity. It could be workforce development, right? Upskilling folks. Like if you look at what Sonu was doing in 1901, there's the service of what you're providing, but there's also the how you're doing it, which was the more fulfilling part for him. He could have done the same business up in Northern Virginia. It probably wouldn't have been nearly as satisfying, right? What was satisfying to it was being able to create these jobs in a place that he'd grown up at where people didn't, have that same kind of opportunity in doing
drink
that.
for free at every bar now.
So what I mean by that, the mission can also be the how you do what you're doing, right? And build a business model around that. Not only the problem that you're solving.
In a business school environment, when we look at jobs, our top employers, and I'm not ashamed to say, but government doesn't. I was looking at slide. I have a slide which is our top employers, and unfortunately, the government is not on one of them, right?
Yep.
But your book brings that excitement. Honestly, I was telling you earlier, it brought the excitement about government. Someone I saw always as a regulator, enforcer, now seems like a very much a part of an exciting innovation. How do you get our next generation to seek out careers in government? How do we prepare them as academics and educators for a career in government, and or at least a partial career in government? Or how do we prepare them for the dual citizenship?
We need a rich techno-economic, government. We just need to be sophisticated. So what does that mean? That means that we need business people. We need, tech folks to be dual citizens. That doesn't mean you have to be in government for your career, right? But I think, let's say you want to start a space, company. I think you understanding how space works inside of government, if they're going to be a big procurer of your products, will help you. So spend a year or two there, right? That doesn't mean you have to spend a career there, but learn the language, right? Like you would as a dual citizen. Learn the people, build a network, build some capability, and most importantly, understand where the big problems are, right? That's what we mean by dual citizenship. So what can schools do? Look, I think engineering schools and business schools, again, over these few decades, we've lost, having faculty and folks that are there to kind of advise people that have government background, right? That can be advising students to think about why government can be valuable to you. That would be, a place. Creating more intersectional classes that talk about building companies around government. Now there's classes out there, I don't know if it's taught here at Virginia Tech, but like hacking for defense, hacking for impact. We're now launching a degree program with Purdue, which we would love to bring to other universities for the first of its kind, and an innovation for public service certificate, right? The idea being that at a business school or at an engineering school, if you take a cohort of classes, you could be recognized as graduating with some kind of semblance of public service being in the ethos, and that it's something that you care about. We don't have things in those programs that even puts it in the ethos, right? So I think just having either faculty and classes and exploring this, I think the shiny through line, though, is entrepreneurship. Like how do you solve these problems that we're facing as a society and government? Again, health, space, climate, and use those problem sets as the context for entrepreneurial pedagogy. Hacking for Defense, which is the program that started at Stanford, is now on 40 campuses, is a good example of that, right? And you've got students thinking about these kinds of problems, and it sensitizes them to building entrepreneurial muscle. But the key here is in a for-profit way. Like, I want to make it clear that people shouldn't feel ashamed of making money if they're solving a big problem. It's okay, right? But we created this binary language of public sector, private sector, not-for-profit, for-profit, where we make students feel one's about doing good and one's about making money. And you can't make money while doing good, and you can't be doing good if you're making money. They're both wrong. Like, it's fundamentally wrong. You're looking at an example right here. He did great work. He built a great company. He did really well for himself, but so did a lot of other people, right? That's what makes this country great. So I think that, I think reinforcing those kinds of models, I think storytelling is important, right? I think getting more, people like Sonu in front of students and role models where they saw people do both. Because you can talk about it in the hypothetical, and this is what we try to do in the book, but when you show people having done it, it brings it to life. Like, it makes it more accessible.
The other thing I'd say is that, so I look back on my career and I go, talk to someone, government buddies that were in the CIA, the FBI, where they were in the military, where they had super felt like, well, your craft, did I just waste my life? Because my buddy, I went to attack with him, ran an agency called DITRA, Defense Threat Reduction Agency. So they monitor all the chemical, nuclear, biological, and radiological weapons in the world. And he ran that agency. And every time I would go have drinks there, I'd be like, geez, I'm trying to build this company and nobody gives a shit anyway, blah, blah, blah. I'm with my ass off. And you're literally solving the world's problems. You're keeping us safe. Now if he's in the private sector, he makes a shit ton of money. But I mean, I believe you're not going to make, if you're making money, you're not going to make it in your 20s. That, I know there's always the one guy that starts a game that now is making $62 million a year on YouTube. He's right. I'm sure there's a lot. Like, everybody does. But so what I'm saying, most of the time, it's about getting the E level, the experience level in your 20s. And then in your 30s, you start kind of figuring out how to put it together. And, if I had to do all over again, I probably would have tried to go see, like, by the way, my side job is I'm a movie producer now. And they were doing these CIA movies and these DEA movies. My partner in the movie business ran special ops for DEA. And he was, went to Villanova, he went to DEA. The stories he tells, I'm like, holy crap, while you were doing that, I was, implementing Oracle in Hutchinson, Kansas. This is the guy that arrested Victor Boot. You guys done that big Soviet arms dealer that just got shaped, Ricky Glamour, and Brian Glamour. We're doing a movie about that. But I mean, he did absolutely amazing things. And now he's doing an entrepreneurial venture with me, making movies. Probably all fine. That's okay too, because it'll be mine. So what I'm saying is, like, they are very cool jobs, but like Arun said, you don't have to pick either or. And you don't even have to do it inside the government. There's a lot of, you guys have like 10x the opportunities. We have 100x. I didn't know what I was looking to get a job. But so, you guys have a lot of opportunities. Kind of combining all that with something you like to do is kind of nirvana. Because if you can make money, have fun, and serve a little higher reward purpose, makes a lot of sense. I used to tell my employees, people don't leave companies for money. Everybody's like, well, Chet's getting paid $4,000 more. It's not leaving because we can't pay for it anymore. It's you leave because either you don't like the people you work for, or you don't like your supervisor. But the real thing is, with companies with a higher order purpose, people stick around.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And look, I feel this look, your generation will need to, respond, but when I'm on campuses talking to folks and we're seeing even with our programs at NobleReach, like, I think your generation gets a short shift because I think you're actually the more mission-oriented generation than previous ones. right? When I talk to my students and see, folks like your age, what I try to tell, folks is, because they're like, how are you going to get these kids excited about it? I'm like, that's the easy part. They're more mission driven, and largely because, look, you've been shaped by COVID. You've been shaped, with an existential threat there, an existential threat with geopolitics and what we've seen in Ukraine and now the Middle East. You've got an existential threat with climate that's ongoing. There's an adversarial one now with great power competition with autocratic adversaries. Like, that's a lot, right? Like, I think 10 years from now, we'll look back on this 5-year period and go, like, this generation was shaped in a very different way. And they're looking for purpose. They understand interconnectedness in a way that previously, like, when everything's going right, it's easy just to worry about yourself. When there's a lot of problems, you're like, all right, how do we all come together to fix this? And I think that's where we are right now, right? I think that's a little bit why the book has resonated the way it has with, and I think that's the opportunity as well. It's like, how do you harness that energy, right, in a meaningful way to solve these problems? And I don't think that was there even 5-10 years ago.
And when you're talking about this level of, collaboration and working together to solve these big problems, I see an underlying theme here, it's trust.
Yes.
And we are at a stage, talking about existential threats, but we are also seeing a lot of lack of trust. Either there's a lack of trust in government or a lack of trust in tech companies or big tech, lack of trust in, from with respect to privacy and security. How do we restore that trust in this next generation? How do we repair that trust? So really we can get all these forces to work and come together.
So look, to me, it is the core question, and it's why it's even more important to have more dual citizens. In the example I used with Nand, it's his trust that ripples through his different communities, right? VCs that are in the Valley that have never worked in the Valley trust Nand. If Nand says these are the folks you should chat with on the government side, they now trust that person. That's how trust works in your networks too, right? Trust isn't links, right? Trust isn't relationships on your social network. It's people and interaction, right? And it's no different. And so we need more of that because that'll ripple through. That's just why we want more people having had these different experiences. In a world of AI, like, I think the hardest thing to it's easy for AI to replicate, depth. It's hard for it to replicate breadth of experience, right? How does it replicate my perspective of having been, in government, out of government, overseas, entrepreneur, big, like, the more different communities you're in, the better. And I would advise that for all of you. Like, don't go into one thing and just, to Sonu's point, in your 20s, find different networks to go be part of. That could be overseas, that could be, entrepreneurial, big company, public sector. Like, trust me, you will be better for it in 10 years.
Yeah, and you'll be richer too. I can guarantee you the people that have, more career experiences by the time they're 35 are going to make a lot more money, especially in the future. Because I'll tell you right now, back when I was here at Tech, we did Fortran 77. I got a D, and freshman ruled it and got a D again. So my dad, who's in the audience, was super proud of me. He's so proud he could barely speak to me. But that was coding. Now AI is going to code. So if you want to be a coder and AI is going to do natural language coding for you, you need a much broader perspective. And that's going to come from getting different experiences. And what different experiences does for you is it creates trust, right? Because you might be working in academics, you might be working in public sector, you might be working in private sector, and you start seeing, how the different groups operate. And really trust is really face-to-face. It's easy. Like on, my kids on social media, people are insulting people on social media, but you don't have to stand face-to-face and insult people. So part of it's also getting face-to-face with people. That's a big, big thing. We didn't have iPhones when I was here in 1832, but, we had to get face-to-face. If you had a problem with somebody, you resolved it face-to-face. And a lot of that's gone now. We need to start doing that again. I don't know if it's possible, but that's kind of a utopia I'm dreaming of. Day without iPhones.
Yeah, and to your point, about face-to-face and being in these different communities, what you also build is empathy, right? And there's a lot of studies that are out there right now when you think about, like, what's going to be the characteristics of successful individuals in a world of AI, it's those that have deep empathy. That's the hardest thing to replicate. Like, how do you interact? So it's no longer, if you look at being a doctor, the best surgeon, but it's the one that can interact with the patient the best. Because 80% of the surgeon stuff, will get, operationalized. And so that human-to-human interaction, I think we're coming full circle, is going to really need to be your differentiator, right? And the more you're in different, communities, the more empathy you'll have around it, right? And that's how that will rebuild trust.
Also about trust in myself. And as an entrepreneur, especially a mission-driven entrepreneur, there have to be that level of trust in myself. So you talked about earlier, your 20s is for discovery, and maybe at 30s, you start realizing some results. What do you want our next generation to, what do you want to leave them with in terms of how much do you think our mission will drive us and drive our trust that we can achieve it? And how do we spend a decade of our life just kind of working on that without seeing those results? Or what would you tell our next generation?
Trusting yourself is not minimizing the risk of failure. Those two things actually aren't related. Trusting yourself is that when things go wrong, you just accept it and you work to get it right. And most of all, you can't, control a lot of things. So I think having a little bit of trust in yourself is really about building a certain sense of resilience. Failure is okay. I failed all the time. If you guys have heard my real career story, instead of, seeing me up here, you'd be like, if this jackass can make a ton of money, anybody can, okay? So that's the takeaway you guys would get, because it wasn't like this. It was like, so I think trusting yourself is, don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to get it wrong. Nobody gets it right the first time. I didn't get it right till time number 107. So, and then what that builds in yourself is you build the confidence to keep doing it, because entrepreneurship, life, everything is about confidence, right? And if you never fail, the first time you fail, what's going to happen? It's going to shatter your confidence. So to me, it's like, spend your 20s just, failing. You guys are going to get degrees from Virginia Tech, okay? I could have never gotten to tech when I graduated high school. Never. I would have been some sort of weird profession, I'm sure. So you guys have a degree from Virginia Tech. You always have that to fall back on. That is the greatest thing about coming to this university. We got 57,000 applications this year. You always are going to have Virginia Tech on your resume. So you have that to fall back on. You can trust that you have that on your resume. Everything else is about trial and error and confidence. And don't worry about if some guy has a nicer car than you when you're 28. Worry about it when you're 55, but not when you're 28.
No, I agree. I mean, I'd also say, as you embark on your careers, a couple frameworks I've used with students. One is called Ikigai. We use it in the book. Ikigai is a Japanese framework. Write 5 things that you are passionate about. Write 5 things that you think you can make money doing. Write 5 things that you think the world needs. And write 5 things that you're good at, right? And hopefully there's some intersection in those 5 things. There's a Venn diagram kind of thing. And the idea is, though, is that if you can find something that kind of crosses those 5 and be intentional about it, periodically, that's where you'll feel the most centered, right? Because you'll be doing something you like, something that the world needs, because that's where purpose comes from. Like if you're doing something you love, but the world doesn't need it, you're going to start to feel hollow purpose. I would contend, and I say this to my business school students at Georgetown, most business school students optimize only out of 2 of those 4, and that is, what am I good at and what can I get paid for? And that's why you end up in consulting firms and banks. Because no one's passionate about that, and the world, God knows, doesn't need more of them, right? And that catches up with you at some point. So be intentional about that decision, and so that would be one framework I would give you. And the other one is one called Design Your Future. The idea being that I think a lot of times people make decisions based on where they're standing today. Like, what's the easiest thing to go do? Again, that's why you end up at consulting firms and banks, because they show up on campus, recruit, give you free dinners, and that's easy, right? Think about what you want to be doing 10 years from now and work backwards, right? Not only think about what you want to be doing, think about 3 things that you would be happy doing 10 years from now. That way, if the one that you're on doesn't work, you're thinking about other things you can pivot to, because everything's not going to work, right? To Sonu's point, like, you need to be comfortable that everything's not going to work. And, I think those would be 2, at least, frameworks to also at least center you a little bit as you go through your career. But a big part of it, I would say, is be intentional. I don't think most people are intentional about their careers. They let things happen to them. And then they wake up 15, 25, whatever the period of time is, to go like, holy shit, where did the time go? What am I doing?
We got a lot of lawyer friends that way. I'm not kidding. We have like a bunch of guys our age that are lawyers, and they're like, God, how did you 2 bozos make money? And I got to go bill more hours. I'm serious.
Well, that's a fascinating way to end our conversation, but not the dialogue yet. But I just want one sentence. I want to bring back our attention to VentureBeat's mission. All our audience have the book. One takeaway you want them to get from the book in one sentence.
I mean, you guys have a generational opportunity to combine purpose and profit for a really fulfilling career if you guys want it. Don't overplay how risky things are, right? It's really not as risky as one, makes it out to be.
Well, thank you for spending the hour with us and introducing us to the idea of mission entrepreneurship, and as well as giving us a very fresh take on the role of the government. It certainly has changed my view on how I see the government, and also sharing some very valuable life lessons. So a round of applause for that.